Why do people say that Jews control the world? This reminds me of a WW2 era joke my grandpa told me, that I will paraphrase here. Two Jewish men are sitting on a park bench in Berlin reading the newspaper. One of them reads the Hebrew paper while the other reads the German. The man reading the Hebrew paper turns to their companion and asks, "Why do you read the German papers? All they tell us are lies." Quote, the second man turns to him and says, "Well, when I read the Hebrew papers, all I read about are how our people are dying. We are being discriminated against. And any mistake we make could be our last. It's depressing. When I read the German papers, what I hear is how we control the world and the government and all of us are rich. It makes me feel much better." Quote. How true is all of this? A number of Jews have prominent positions in business, finance, and entertainment. Most of us are just average people. We aren't a cabal that collectively controls the world. If we were, I'd quit my day job. The idea that we do is born out of centuries of anti-Semitic rhetoric that makes us into scapegoats because, for most of our history, we have been the other, that's all. Jew here. All I can say is I've never been invited to any secret meetings. I have no secret world control. In fact, I can hardly even control my bladder. Flushed. Perhaps as many as 3/4 of the Jews in Central and Western Europe were limited to the precarious occupations of retail peddling, hawking, and street banking, that is, moneylending. The fact that Christians regarded such occupations as incompatible with their religious principles fed the notion that Jews were morally deficient, willing to engage in unethical business practices that decent people had rejected. It's great to have a simple, easy to understand reason for why your life is so screwed up. Especially if your life is really screwed up and you aren't exactly the brightest person. And it's especially convenient if that reason is a common enemy that you and all of your friends can hate together, and you can teach your kids to hate. Because hate is easier to bear than helplessness. People are able to ignore an amazing amount of evidence and common sense just to make the reality of the world fit into their idea of how everything should work. When I was a child, I came home from school and asked my mother what a Gentile was. She said it meant a non-Jew. I said that made no sense since the teacher told us some children play with their Gentiles. As a half-Jew, there's a number of reasons people think that about us. We are wildly successful. Jews are disproportionately successful to their population size. There's about 15 million Jews, about 0.2% of the world's population. Yet, we represent 20% of Nobel laureates, 12.5% of Fortune 500 CEOs, and significant percentages of Hollywood and media personnel. Our culture generally is insular. You can't become a Jew generally. You're born one. Conversation happens. But it's not nearly as common as in Christianity. The result is an exclusionary culture that acts like a private club. Nobody likes private clubs. Our culture is notoriously self-supporting. Jews will help friends and relatives get positions and favors, which in turn begets more friends and more favors. One hand washes the other. So net-net you have a group of notoriously smart and successful people that don't let others into their circle, and who often stay amongst themselves, and who openly help each other out regularly. When you look at that behavior, it comes across like a conspiracy of one group of people to take over. After all, Zev didn't help me out at all, but he helped get his cousin Ari an internship in marketing. Now Ari's neighbor, Rebecca, is interviewing with finance. The Jews have never numbered more than 15 million worldwide at any point in history. So even if every last Jew in the world was in on it, That'd still be 533 different Gentiles that each individual Jew has to keep track of. Maybe it's irony or on purpose. But January 27th is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. Some people will always think what they want to think. There are some very rich Jewish families. A lot of people spread conspiracy theories that those families are secretly controlling the world and can be blamed for everything they dislike. There is absolutely no exaggeration about the awfulness of the Holocaust. You can listen to actual recorded interviews with Holocaust survivors here. The Holocaust was a deliberate attempt to murder all the Jews in Europe. 6 million Jews were murdered, along with many other undesirables. You can read more about Hitler's so-called final solution on Wikipedia. In the Middle Ages, there were a lot of Jewish people scattered throughout Europe. In most of the places they were allowed to settle, they were not allowed to own land. And in those days, most skilled crafts either required some bit of land or were employed largely by the church, making those routes difficult for Jewish people. So they found a niche in banking and trade. It was Jewish moneylenders that propped up several crowns and even churches during that time. But since the courts wouldn't find in favor of a Jew, if a monarch refused to make good on their debts, it could be a risky investment for the lender. A lot of the arguments your sister made can be traced to that time in history. Allegations that the Jews secretly control world government, for example, come from as far back as the 1400s. And allegations similar to those were used to justify the expulsion, exile, and even execution of many Jewish people during the Middle Ages. And since then. But those arguments were lies then as they are now. Some monarch who'd run up a hefty debt and now wanted to avoid paying would start some rumors. A few whispers here. Have you noticed how wealthy the Oppenheimer family is? I heard they've been secretly controlling the nephew of the king. You know he's got that gambling problem? Well, Joe Oppenheimer lent him $1,000 last May to get out of that spot of trouble. Now I wouldn't be surprised if that nephew does anything Joe tells him to. Quote, a rumor there. All our sons have gone off to the Crusades and died. All the Jewish families still have their sons. I wonder if that's because all the wastrel limbs off the royal family tree owe money to the Jewish moneylenders? They get richer while our sons die. It doesn't take too long before the whole kingdom is running around gossiping about 6 Jew bankers. And they're all begging you, the king, who happens to owe twice the annual GDP of your country to various moneylenders, to pass a law expelling or executing all the Jewish people from your country. And suddenly, you're out of debt and your kingdom calls you a hero. Anti-Semitic stories have been around for thousands of years. And they've always been spread by people who want to steal something or cheat someone. Some things still haven't changed. As I was driving home in my 12-year-old car to my house that badly needs repairs, I said to myself, boy, it feels great to control the world's financial systems. They say this because they are bigoted idiots. It's always crazy to me when there are Holocaust deniers, downplayers. They don't get that the Germans, to their credit, are so detailed-oriented and meticulous record keepers, and they got the death toll estimates from the Nazis' own records. They even destroyed a bunch. And the numbers still added up. Huge woman facepalming, medium skin tone woman facepalming, medium skin tone woman facepalming, medium skin tone. If Jewish folks controlled the world, nothing would happen on Sundays, since modern life is about buttons and switches. Rich people control all that. A few of them are Jewish, but most aren't. Jews have been scapegoated and discriminated against for a very, very long time. They were often treated as second-class citizens, and it's always easy to make a disliked minority into a scapegoat for anything you want, especially when easy access to information hasn't taken hold in society yet. Go back far enough and you find a time when Christians didn't lend money because they believed it was forbidden to charge interest, and they certainly weren't willing to do it without getting paid. That's all risk and no reward. Jews at the time were outright banned from many professions by Christian kings and queens, but not from becoming lenders. Their religion didn't forbid charging interest, so they saw an opportunity to have actual decent jobs, and some of them became moneylenders. That's the origin of the stereotype that Jews are greedy. During the Black Plague, Jews died at much lower rates than Christians. Christians decided this was proof that the plague was caused by Jewish witchcraft. In reality, the plague was being spread largely by rats. Christians at the time believed cats were bad luck and unclean, so they didn't own any. Meanwhile, the Jewish parts of town, which existed because the nicer places wouldn't sell or rent to Jews, had a lot more cats. They were good cheap pets that helped keep rodents away. So the Jewish areas had far fewer rats and thus less plague. What's the deal with Jews in Hollywood though? They're everywhere. Well, this story, like all the others, starts with them being treated as second-class citizens. Like the moneylenders story. The early 1900s, many professions just didn't hire Jews. So they mostly looked down upon professions. This meant that a ton of the old vaudeville performers were Jewish. Vaudeville was a style of performance theater. With the invention of movies, the vaudeville industry fell apart. So all those Jews were out of jobs, and this new movie industry was hiring, and they already had performance experience. So Hollywood quickly hired a ton of Jews, and a few of them made it to the top. It doesn't help that Jews have very distinctive last names and often facial features as well. That makes it so much easier to discriminate against them, whether you see them in person or read their name. Between being generally discriminated against and easier to identify, they were Hitler's ideal scapegoat. He blamed all of Germany's problems on people who didn't have enough power to actually cause any significant problems for Germany. And the people eventually went along with it. Some because they agreed. Others because they were afraid not to. We have names of so many who died in the Holocaust, along with clear records of their existence. We have pictures of wheelbarrows full of engagement and marriage rings taken off of the murdered Jews and a few other minorities. We have pictures of concentration camps before and after freeing the victims. We're pretty sure on that 6 million number. But even after the fall of Nazi Germany, there were still Nazis who defended its actions. They found that they couldn't effectively defend genocide to anyone remotely sane, so they decided to go with denial instead. They denied it happened and blamed it on the evil lying Jews, as was their go-to plan for everything. Some particularly hateful people have latched on to those stories. There are tons more stories exactly like those. They all go the same way. Jews are discriminated against. Minority Jews try to survive anyway. A new reason to hate the Jews. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a sitting member of Congress, declared that Jews had space lasers, a weapon that's just not practical with modern technology. These people make up stories that defy physics just to justify their bigotry. Some Jews are successful and powerful, but most people who are successful and powerful are not Jews. Most of the power in the world does not belong to Jews, and the Jews who do have power aren't generally teaming up with other Jews. They're teaming up with whichever other powerful people that are most convenient for getting more power. But there's a very long and deep history of bigotry towards the Jews, and that's very difficult to stop. So we have modern-day neo-Nazis who still support Hitler's policies towards Jews. We have people who are less extreme but still full of hate and bigotry. But ultimately, Jews are just like the rest of us. No secret cabals. No incredible power. Just people. This is not something that you should make a decision on because of Reddit answers. I'm sorry that you encountered an anti-Semite in your life. But if somebody said to me, "You know what I think about all black people?" I would go, "Nope," and turn around. Make your own decisions. Don't listen to that idiot or Reddit on this one. And then there's this comment section. Actively trying to downplay the atrocities of the Holocaust and signal boost anti-Semitic conspiracies. It's not true. Jews are just people. Just like anyone else. There are good people who are Jews. And bad people who are Jews. Good people who are Christian. Bad people who are Christian. Etc. etc. The amount of power in Jewish hands is absolutely dwarfed by the amount of power in Christian hands. It's not even close.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Eracast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.